Q&A tool. I'll grab you. I'll let you know. Go ahead and unmute and just go ahead and talk right there. We're going to get to as many people in the hour as we can. I've got Pete here, Peter TREVISANI. He's the owner, president, CEO of New Mexico United. As I mentioned before, we hope to do a lot more of these. And just one more important thing, want to make sure that we all kind of just stay respectful of each other, regardless of where we fall in the issues. The whole purpose of this is to hear each other and to listen to each other and work together, because this ultimately is a community project. So thank you guys for taking the time. If you guys want to start using that hand raise tool, I will go ahead and start trying to get some people who want to speak in here. And I'll start with Pete. Pete, go ahead, and I'm going to do a quick little intro.
Yeah, I got my hand up. Thanks, David, and really good to see everybody. Great to see this response, and what that just says to me, engagement, and that's what we need, especially when we have issues that people have strong feelings towards. We need to hear each other out. This is community conversation. It's not New Mexico United infomercial. And so you're not going to hear a huge amount of prepared remarks from me in terms of, rah, why we need to do this. I do want to explain a few things and obviously where our position is. And I want to use this as a way to hear from everybody on this Zoom and learn and hopefully also share our views with it. So that's really what we're doing. We're going to do a lot of these, as David said. Some are going to be in person, some on Zoom, and we're going to do as many as we need to bring this conversation, advance the conversation forward. I think there's just a couple things I'll say about the stadium that may or may not be clear, and that could maybe help framework, because we'll get to questions anyways. So maybe I'll talk about that, and then I'm going to stop talking. We're going to go to hand raising. So one, why do we need a stadium for New Mexico United, right? We're a soccer team. We do have a requirement. When we brought this team here, a private team that we put private money into, we knew that we didn't have a soccer-specific stadium, and we were okay with that because we felt that we could prove what we could be as a team and what we could mean to the community. And we also didn't know what kind of facility we'd need. Would we need a 4,000 seat stadium? 14,000 seat stadium, and so that we just felt like, let's just play. Let's see how the community feels about the team, how New Mexico feels about it. And so that's what we've done, and we've had a lot of success. I know some people here have been to games, some haven't. This is open to the public. This isn't just the Curse or supporters group. This is everybody. Our attendance was almost 13,000, and I think if you've been to a game or you've been following, I think we can say that it's been successful. And it's about a lot more than soccer. And so the first question that we get is, well, why don't you just stay at UNM, go across the street? They got a big football stadium. And there's some important things there in terms of would they want us there, the money it would take to convert. But the biggest issue that we have is simply this: programming. In that area right now with those facilities, you have UNM football games, you have soccer games with the Lady Lobos, track, there's the pit has basketball games, there's bull riding, the Isotopes play 70 games at a minimum. They also want to have concerts. In some ways, if we didn't have COVID this year, we probably would have struggled to get all our home games in because some of the other teams canceled. So when any of those things are playing, whenever there's an event, we don't have the ability to play because we can't have two events at one time. And so the chances of us expanding programming, like bringing a professional women's team, which is definitely an aspiration of ours, and we've had those conversations, that's always off the table. Ideas like high school soccer games off the table. We're barely able to get our games in as they are. So the programming is really the biggest problem over there. It's not necessarily the redesigning of the facility. And I think the second question, which probably we get asked all the time, is why are we using public money for a private soccer team? And I think that there could be a complicated answer to that, and I'll try to keep it simple, and I'm happy to dive into it some more. Which is that, first of all, when you look at all the stadiums in the United States, and we go through them, about 97% of them are some kind of public-private partnership, meaning they're paid for. They're a community asset that the public supports. Like we support a lot of different community assets in New Mexico, And then there's private money that comes in to partner with that. In New Mexico, we have anti-corruption laws, which I think serve us pretty well, that say that a public and private entity cannot own the same asset. So if you've heard from me, New Mexico United can't buy 20% of the stadium and own 20% of the stadium. So we have to get creative of how we're going to put money in other ways. And we are going to put money in. There's just no doubt about that. It's just, we can't own the stadium. So we can't buy the stadium, but we can, put money in, and we can bridge that gap between where we are in the funding. We have about 10 million almost raised. If the bond goes through at 50 million, that's 60, 70 is the project. That's, I think, the kind of amount the team would come in and support. There's a couple different ways that we can do it, but we'll know more about exactly how we're going to do it when we have, when the bond's passed. So we actually have a conversation to have, and then finding the location, and then, talking to the city about operating and community benefits programs on top of that. So the club absolutely is going to put capital in, and not just, rent, but, put some money in to help build out the stadium on top of rent. And we're open to getting creative and figuring out what that is. So we are going to be putting money in. And we also are not going to be the only one using the stadium. New Mexico United won't be the only program. The idea is that it's something that's open every day, that's part of the community. It's integrated into wherever it goes. It's going to be integrated in that community in a way that's appropriate, that serves the community interests. And ideally, it's open every day so people can use it like a public park, and have other things, whether it's music or community events during the day. It shouldn't just be a place where the lights come on at 7 or 8 o'clock and they go off at midnight. It's just dormant the rest of the time. So, I feel like, those are just a couple points, I wanted to get across. I do believe it can be a catalyst. I think that when we're looking at these public-private these partnerships, and I'll just end on this, is that they don't always go well. There's definitely stadium deals in cities across the country that have been horrible. And I've actually spent a lot of time reading about them because I want to understand how not to do them. And the fact is that one of the most successful ones that we've had is right here with Isotopes, which was funded in the same way, and was paid back. So not only is it a bond, it's paid back, and hopefully paid back early. And so that's how Isotopes Park got built. And the money got paid back to the city, and the city can use that money for other things. And I would like to think we could all agree that, it's been better having the Isotopes in Albuquerque over the last 20 years than not having them, and that it's been a good use of funds and a successful project. I'll leave it to individuals to decide if we feel the same way, but for me, I think it's been a big win. So that's it. Those are just a few of the points. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. I'm happy to answer any questions, or David can answer any questions. I don't know if we have any hands up.
We do. So up first, Talk Hercules. Talk, if you want to go ahead and
the only thing, first of all, congratulations on that United. And, my wife and I, we have actually attended a few games, and we have enjoyed, the event. I'm a former soccer player myself, played almost semi-pro, so I understand the sport. I understand the context behind it. As far as the stadium, I'm 100% on it, and I support it 100%. The only thing that I have as a question is a 10,000 people stadium. I think it's a little bit too small, because I think based on what my wife and I would have experienced with the games, this is going to go big, and it's going to go big for a long time. The only thing that I would say is, if the stadium gets built, once it gets built, will it have room for addition or improvement? And if so, why don't we build it just about a 20,000 capacity or 25,000 capacity per se? And I know money is an issue, I know that, and the bonds will also have to actually be up there as well. But it's something that I'm projecting for the future, because we have future generations that are going to follow this sport, and the World Cup is around the corner, and it's going to be a hot commodity, pretty much, like the game. So, but again, congratulations and thank you for the opportunity of letting me talk.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Hawk, and I appreciate the support. And, you know, and I really hope that one day we're talking about that the stadium's too small, because then I think it means, at least from that side, it's been a success. But we also have to make sure it's a success from the community's point of view, and that every time we add more capacity, you're putting more strain on the area that you're in. Some areas are well equipped to handle a 100,000 seat stadium. Others couldn't handle a 5,000 seat stadium. So, you know, depending on the location, you know, there may be some options. I do think that what the city proposed in the site survey, which I've got right here, which is pretty lengthy, is, you know, that 10 to 12,000 with the ability to expand to 15,000. If that's appropriate, meaning that there's demand and that the community area that it's located in could support that.
Hey, anybody else want to throw their hand up there? The hand raise is under, I believe it's under your participants tab. If you guys want to, if you have questions or comments, things you want to say, go ahead and hit your raise hand. Robert Chenard, go ahead.
So I know we're looking at 2 locations that are preferred locations downtown. Are there any parts of the stadium that are going to be community oriented to like really involve those areas? Because Morelos is a very historic neighborhood, lots of old families and a lot of history of our state that we don't want to lose, but we want to involve them in the conversation. So how can we get them involved?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it would be awesome if you could just talk to one person or one organization or have one Zoom meeting and cover it all, but you can't. We're not set up like that in New Mexico. We're not set up like that in Morelos. So it's a series of a lot of conversations with different community leaders and also individuals. Not everyone is part of a community organization that cares about their neighborhood. So we've spent some time there in the past, but you know, we're going to be having those conversations, you know, I think from the team perspective, but it's important the city has those conversations. It's the city stadium. The city's going to own the stadium. They're going to put $50 million in. That's the proposal. They're going to own a $70 million plus asset. And it's also important that they're out there in the community. But we've been in the community as just part of our own mission. But you know, I think the community needs to be involved in the design, right? Some of the design decisions. How can it best benefit the Morelos community? We want to hear from them. How do they want to use a stadium if it's in their neighborhood? And I think those are the conversations that we really have to get right before we break ground anywhere.
And I mean, that's something that, again, you mentioned, Pete, we've already kind of started that process. And something that we're going to be continuing doing with these. This is the first community conversation, and we want to do those in the communities where the stadium could be. So whether that be Morelos or whether it be near Sawmill or wherever it may be, this is the first one, but there's going to be several more of these. Again, the whole purpose of that is to hear from people and hear their ideas on one hand, their concerns on the other, and everything in between. All right, up next, Casey Chopito, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I guess kind of an extension of the question that Robert just asked. I looked through the CAA Icon feasibility study, and when it listed out all the different areas where the stadium could potentially be, one of the things that I noticed that was really missing was some sort of discussion on the potential impacts on the specific neighborhoods and communities that are going to be there. And it spoke about things like at the rail yard site. It was a historic site, but there was nothing that really mentioned the community there, how long people have lived there, things like that. And so I guess my biggest question is, can you kind of explain or go into more detail on how you intend to, I know you just kind of mentioned this, but I wonder if you could go into more detail on how you intend to involve the community in this decision and kind of get those discussions. I know something like Zoom like this is a great way, but I'm wondering if you can kind of speak more on how you intend to interact and discuss with these communities, just to make sure that no one's unnecessarily displaced or there's no kind of unintended consequences on those communities.
Yeah, Casey, thanks for the question. And I think you're right. You know, these studies are really in depth, especially around quantitative points. You know, how much, the return, the spreadsheets, they lack when it comes to really getting into the human elements and the nuances. They don't recognize all those things. And so, you know, I think that just an extension of what we just said, you know, from United's point of view, we're just going to continue to engage and listen to the community and hear what they have to say. And we know there's people in the Bareilles neighborhood that are not excited about this project. We know that there are some that are very excited and a lot that are unsure. So hear from them what they have to say. And when I say they, you know, you're really talking about a group of individuals. There's no person that speaks for everybody. Everybody has their own voice and their own opinion, and everybody needs to be heard. And we don't want to just think that, oh, well, the neighborhood association was on board, so it's good to go. And no, that's not good enough. We have to be willing to talk to every business, every person, every organization, and listen. And I think that's going to take a long time. We've started, you know, I personally started because I want to hear it, and I want to learn. I don't live too far from there. I have an apartment on Central in 3rd, and I live there a few days a week, so I'm not too far from there. But I want to learn about those neighbors, and so that's what I'm going to continue to do, and also take every call that comes in or every email that gets written and listen, even if I don't like what I'm hearing, even if it doesn't feel good. That's okay.
Yeah, and I think if I can jump a little bit off of that too, I know it's important that, you know, we bring historians into this process, right? People who know the community, who have been there for a long time. You know, I think it's important for us to point out that, you know, we should come up with a community benefits agreement that makes sense. You know, one that goes out of our way to make sure that people are not displaced. And we need to bring representatives into the stadium process throughout. And then that starts here, like we talked about. This is the first of the community conversations, but it goes into everything that we're doing with regard to this. It can't just end with this as well. All right. Up next is Omega Delta. I believe you're the next. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I am a resident of the Bareilles community, and for one, I'm on both sides, right? I think it's great. I think putting it in the neighborhood will, you know, there'll be some there'll be some pros and some cons. But I did just have sort of a clarifying question. So you did mention that, you know, you're going to start having these community discussions. But really, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, what the point of today's discussion is, because you're right, like, the city will own the asset. The city will come in with their development plans. So I'm just trying to understand, like, are you going to create a report of today's, like, the conversations that New Mexico United has with the community? Are you guys going to report back to the city, or what are you going to do with this information?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for that. And I'm open to any suggestions. You know, while we're not the owner of the stadium, you know, we are a stakeholder, right? We have a team that would be, you know, a primary tenant, and so we do have a seat at the table. But you're right, we don't sit at the head of the table, and that's okay. So our job is to you know, work with the city, and I do believe the city, you know, would parallel how we feel about it, which is that it's got to be done the right way. And we're not out there to create harm. We're out there to create positive outcomes and be a catalyst, not a detriment. So, you know, we do talk to the city, and also, you know, city leaders can change, right? They can change over years. And, you know, this is a multi-year project, so it's important that all that's documented and that stakeholders remain consistent. So we'll be there the whole way. And we're gonna continue with our messaging the whole way, and we're gonna push back if it doesn't feel like it's being done right.
And ultimately, I mean, this is a community project first and foremost. You know, it belongs to the city, it belongs to the community, it belongs to the people. And so, if we're not listening, then we're not doing things the right way. We need to know what people's concerns are, but also what people's ideas are. Right? It should be something that represents us as people. It should be something that represents New Mexicans, something that people can be proud of, and we don't know necessarily what that is for each individual person unless we listen. And we need to do our best job to make sure that it is representative of the community. All right, up next is, I believe, Marisa. Marisa PSL, I believe you're up next.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the correct pronunciation of my name. I appreciate that. So I have PSL because I'm with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and we do actually a lot of work with unhoused individuals in Albuquerque. So I understand the concern of not knowing, when you're going to have United Games with other sports individuals occupying the spaces, but I think it's really interesting, to say the least, to prioritize that when there's a lot of other things going on in this. Like I was mentioning, all the unhoused individuals. We just had a year of a pandemic. You know what I mean? So many people are struggling. A moratorium against evictions just had to be extended. 6 million people in this whole country are facing eviction, being unhoused. And I think the city of Albuquerque prioritizing a new sports stadium when we have unhoused individuals, people economically suffering from the pandemic, and just a slew of other issues, you know what I mean? Malnutrition among children. City resources can be going there. City resources can be going towards the people, because the people are not going to be owning the stadium. The people are not going to be making money from the stadium.
Yeah. I just didn't want to stop, Marissa. If you're still going, please. Are you done?
Yes, I resign my time.
Okay, thanks for that. I really appreciate those comments, and I get it, and I respect that this project is not a priority for everybody. It may not even, it's not a top 10 for everybody. It may be last for some people. For other people, it's important, and I really, the way I just look at it, and I'm not a politician, nor do I want to be a politician. That's a different industry. It's a different, I want to serve my community in a different way, but I don't really feel like we are just going to end up doing one thing, right? We have to be ready to do a lot of things at the same time. We have to be ready to put resources into crime and homelessness and into things like rent abatement, if that's what is going to help solve the problem. And all these issues that we have. And we also, while we're trying to solve the problems that are right in front of us, I also think it's important that we have community projects that build a bridge of hope, that show that, we also want to, support our community in other ways that come together, and why the public you're right, I guess you could have an event at the stadium and potentially make some money on that. That's an option, but I understand it's not. There are going to be people who will make profits from having things there, but that doesn't mean it's not a benefit for the community at all. I don't believe. I think if it's done right, if we're promoting ourselves, if we make sure the food comes from farms of New Mexico, that can support us, and that can solve some of the issues that you just mentioned. And if we can be a catalyst for some local businesses and help them, most of our local businesses are family owned. They're not huge chains, especially in that area. And if we're talking downtown. And so if we could be a catalyst for them, then I think that's a benefit too. And so I think it's just a balance. This is a one-time project, which is important. It's not every year. And the money will get paid back. That is how it's structured. So it's not money that just goes into a innate object that beautifies the neighborhood. It actually, will drive revenue and get the money back, and then that money can in turn go into new projects. So I really appreciate your point of view, and understand that where you're coming from, and it's always good to hear that. So thank you for sharing.
I think we've got a couple people who put stuff in the chat. They were not really paying too much attention to the chat. We want to make sure people have a chance to get their hands raised, and we can make sure we get through enough time. All right, up next, I believe it was Irving Alvarado. Sorry if I mispronounced that. You're up, Irvin. Oh, you're muted, sir. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Don't mind. I can see. I don't know if I can unmute you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, you could say Gallardo or Gallardo, depending on your accent. What's easier for you? I want to say congratulations. I do think this is great for the community. yes, we are just coming out of this pandemic. However, I think that's something we should consider when it comes to designing this new stadium, the distance that we're gonna have. How is it gonna essentially, you gotta imagine how everything is gonna really play out. And I think it's great. It's gonna, like you were saying earlier, if we can get food from New Mexico farms, this is gonna increase the economy. It's gonna, you're gonna be able to hire people at the stadium. And it's a sport that is healthy, right? This is a pandemic that essentially we need to be able to breathe. We need to be able to enjoy ourselves and not be stuck at home. So essentially the stadium could be used for many different things, holding events. We need to think about the noise population. We need to think about, is it gonna be an outdoor arena? Is it gonna have a dome? Just many different things. So I think having a forum like this is great. However, there's other things that we could do, like a Telegram group chat, a GitHub repository that's open to the public where people can submit ideas, drawings. I'm a Marine. I was 17, I enlisted, so I've seen a lot of the worlds. I've seen a lot of stadiums. I've seen a lot of architectural structures. So I have familiarity on what I think people as a whole, as a community, should really be preparing for in the future. And that's mainly these viruses that are coming up, and just keeping up that distance. Really, I think it's huge. Just like a 20,000 capacity is what I'm thinking, just to be a little safe. And that's really what I got as an introduction.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. And, by the way, if anyone either speaks today or, isn't comfortable in such a forum like this, you can always reach out to us directly. We want to continue whatever individual conversations anyone has. So if we somehow, if I get it wrong if I didn't answer the question you asked, or you want to go deeper, let's do that. That invitation's out there for everybody. And I think the big thing I just took away from your comment there, we have some of the most talented people in the world, not just talented for New Mexico, but just talented artists are at the top of the list. And I think that we have to incorporate our local talent. That whatever we build, this isn't just, I don't believe it's not just for this facility. I think it's for all of our facilities. It has to demonstrate and be demonstrative of who we are as a people and really represent us. And that can be tough because we're so many different things. I always feel like no two Mexicans are really alike. We're all a little different in our own ways. And so I think getting in all those opinions, getting all of the creativity together, while that might take a little longer and maybe sometimes can be frustrating when you collaborate at a large level, that's how we're going to create something beautiful that will be vibrant and be a catalyst wherever it is placed. And again, being a catalyst is a huge part of this project. So thank you for that.
Okay, up next, I believe, would be Cynthia Rodriguez. Go right ahead, Cynthia.
Hi, yeah, I just kind of want to echo what Marissa was saying, her concerns. So earlier in this discussion, you said that it was $50 million you'd be asking from the city to fund you. And I see some people have also been putting in the chat that there's some funding for like housing, the issue of jobs. But how do you justify $50 million being put into a soccer stadium that isn't going to immediately benefit any of the people of the city? Just like she said, there's houseless people, there are people that don't have jobs. You're talking about the idea of making these events, so it's not even like it's going to be, so these are like seasonal jobs that you're talking about, so they're not going to be steady, I assume. Even if you do have stuff that are incoming, I'm assuming that they're going to be more like temporary jobs. They're not going to be something people can rely on year round. So if you could just kind of go in further about how $50 million for this stadium is more beneficial than actually, housing people.
Yeah. Thank you, Cynthia. I really appreciate that, the question. And, first I would say that the number came from, it's the city study they conducted. It wasn't New Mexico United asking the city for $50 million. They conducted a study, and the people they hired came back with the numbers, and the city decided on the number that they wanted to request. It is important why, that it's not New Mexico, these aren't the requests that are being made from us. We definitely want to have a stadium, and we're supportive of that, but the numbers really come down to the city, and because it is their project. And I think what you said is really spot on in a couple ways. One, we can't just do one or the other. And, just like we don't put all of our money into one thing, whether it's homelessness or crime, we have to put it into both. And then we have other things like education and health. We have a lot of needs. And in this case, this project is a one-time project that supports the needs of a community in a little bit different way. And it doesn't undermine some of the destitution that we have, but it does also say that we also have to have things that provide, hope for some people too in a different way, and give us an asset that our kids will enjoy, or our kids' kids will enjoy, that will want them to stay in Albuquerque and continue to work here and not have to move away because they don't feel like they have a community that they're connected to. And there's so many ways to do that, but a team is one of them, not the way, just a way, one of many ways, but an important way for so many to come together. And I think if we can come together, the more we come together, whatever our agreements and disagreements are, then I think the better chance we have of solving all our problems. I really believe it. And I think we, in a small way, New Mexico United has had a positive impact, but it's just one of many organizations that are having a positive impact. So, I think, I'm happy to talk about it more. I think it's a long conversation. I don't think it's the kind of conversation where you necessarily change anyone's mind one way or the other, but I definitely hear you that we have a lot of major problems. They have to be addressed. We think that in the long run, part of the solution, and I'm happy to talk about it more. So thank you.
And then if I could just follow up on that, regard to kind of the full-time and part-time or seasonal jobs. There will be seasonal jobs, there will be part-time jobs, and there will be full-time jobs. Our hope is to have, we would love to have the stadium open year-round for people to use, in addition to just soccer games, and there could be events and meetings, and maybe we keep the stadium open. We've talked about this a lot, keep the stadium open so that people can access it, during the day year-round, instead of maybe walking around the mall. Maybe they walk around the stadium instead to get their exercise and things of that nature. But there will be full-time jobs. There will be jobs that are year-round. I mean, if you look at the staff needed to run a place like Sandia Casino, or if you look at the staff needed to run a place like some of the cultural centers or places like that, there's permanent full-time staff that's needed, and we certainly would have, while we would have seasonal and part-time people as well, there would certainly be full-time jobs. All right. Up next, I think, is Aaron Buck Burnett. Aaron, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hey, good evening. How you guys doing?
Good. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, first, before I say anything, I would like to take you up on the ability to have a long conversation about this. I work at KKOB, and I'd like to invite you on the show, the midday show, and maybe we can have a conversation about this soon, because I just feel like there are a lot of muddy things out there about this that kind of aren't making sense. So I have a two-part question. Before I do that, I do want to make one observation and kind of something that's just been kind of rattling around in my head. This seems it reminds me a lot of the art project and the Rail Runner project. And the reason why I bring that up is because the Rail Runner project currently operates at like a $30 million a year deficit. Ridership is going down. We have balloon payments that are coming up in 25 and 26 that total like $250 million. And then we all know what a nightmare the art project was for Albuquerque. And let me just say very clearly, I am not opposed to a stadium at all. I'm a business owner downtown. We probably host, we have two concert venues and a bar, and another bar, and we probably yearly host as many people as you guys host during the season. So I'm not opposed to a stadium. It just needs to make sense financially and needs to be done right at the right time, in my opinion. So the two questions that I have, has the United approached any private equity groups or VCs about doing maybe a JV with you guys, a joint venture with United to help fund this thing? Because it seems like there's not, it just seems to me there's like the United wouldn't have enough skin in the game in order to make me feel comfortable. And then the second part of the question is the wanting of the stadium basically just a path for you guys to get to the MLS? Because it's my understanding after doing some research that the only way you can become an MLS team is if you own your own stadium.
Great, and thanks, Aaron, for that. First of all, on the air, off the air, whatever you want, I'm happy to talk to you about it more, and let's go do that.
Okay.
So that in the books, and happy to, when it works for you and works for us, we'll do it sooner rather than later.
We can do it Friday if you'd like.
Yeah, Aaron, let me put my email in the chat here. If you want to shoot me an email, I get all those set up. Happy to get that rolling here. One second.
Okay.
It's bad day to share a computer.
Okay, there's my email. Just if you want to shoot me an email, get that set up.
We'll do.
And so, I mean, just to touch on your other 2 points, projects like the ARC project, the Rail Runner project, I don't know that much about those projects in terms of all the steps that went into. I see what I've written both and I've read about them, and but I think that the project that this most mimics in terms of size of investment and return and the way things are structured and paid back is the deal the city did around Isotope Stadium, which is about 20 years ago. And I think some people might remember that was actually, a lot of people wanted to have it downtown and ended up not having it downtown, but it went out where it is now, and that bond got paid back, I believe, in 13 years or 11, and it's been, all the money's been paid back, and it's a profit center for the city. It's profitable, I'm sure, for the Isotopes, but I also think it's been a great community asset for people that attend games or work there full-time, part-time. And so that's the model that we're really trying to mimic. And I think that's the one that we're most aligned with, because all the inputs and outputs are pretty much exactly the same. And, and I feel like we are going to have a lot of skin in the game. And, as I said, if we're at 60 million and we need to, if we're talking about that gap between 60 and 70 million, that's where the team can step in. And we will step in with private money, and it will be skin in the game. I don't own the stadium. United doesn't own the stadium. We're not owning anything for the investment we're making. We're making an investment in the community. We're making an investment in each other. Yes, if we run it right, we can make money. But rather than maximizing profits and optimizing profits, I'd rather optimize outcomes by having food from New Mexico, by having local artists show their work. They're having community spaces that might mean we have a few less seats, but we have more art. I mean, those, nothing about New Mexico United has ever been about, trying to get rich. We've been successful, and that's great, and we're growing, but it's always been about how do we create positive outcomes for people. And so I think we're going to continue that. We absolutely are going to have a lot of skin in the game and a lot to lose. And mostly, we want this to work, because that's where we really stand to lose. Is if we're not successful, then the next project's going to have an even higher hurdle. And we want to create, we want to reduce barriers, not increase barriers. So that's our approach, and I'm looking forward to diving into it at whatever level you'd like to. So thanks, Aaron.
And then Aaron, with regard to you mentioned the MLS conversation, that's not necessarily the aspiration. It's more so the women's team that I think is more the focus. We've said publicly many times we really want to bring a women's team, professional women's soccer team, to New Mexico, and that's something that we would need the stadium in order to do. So I think it's much significantly less about MLS and more about women's. And I just saw your message, Aaron. There, I'm going to find a way to send it to you privately. Or you know what I'll do? I'll find your email on the form and I'll email it to you. Is that cool? Thumbs up. That work? Cool. Awesome. All right. Up next, Nicole Jackson. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Nicole.
Yeah. Hi, good evening. First, thanks for hosting this. I think it's really important to have these types of opportunities for the community to engage with you, so I appreciate you hosting it. My big question centers, it kind of piggybacks off of comments earlier made regarding the fiduciary side of things. And so it's my understanding that the city are owners and you're effectively leasing the stadium. Given the pandemic and the interruption to athletic events, what sorts of guarantees are made in terms of the lease that you're possibly structuring with the city regarding continuity of payments from New Mexico United to the city to cover the lease in the event that you aren't able to hold any games? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, one that I've actually really been trying to think about a lot personally and exploring, other ways. And so you're right. While the pandemic, hopefully the worst of it's behind us, we just don't know, right? And we don't know when the next pandemic is. There's just no way of knowing. But let's hopefully, the worst of this is behind us.
Yeah, there is.
Time will tell. But I think the biggest thing that we could do, one thing that we could do, there's multiple things. One thing that we can do, though, is while we do rent, why don't we prepay the rent for the next 5 or 10 years? Why don't we write a check, hand the rent in, and that way, if there's a pandemic and there's no season, we pay the rent. If the team collapses for some reason, because we have 5 years of pandemic and we can't ride it out, we paid the rent. And while that won't feel good to anybody, it at least shows that, we did have skin in the game and we had something to lose and we took some risks. So that's one thing that we absolutely, can propose and will propose to the city. And I'm open to other ideas. This, like I said, that we want to, we want this to be a positive and we want people to feel comfortable. And I know that there's been a lot of things that have happened that haven't gone that way at the city level, the state level. We all have other things and maybe things didn't go the way we wanted financially. And so we want to try to de-risk it as much as possible. And so that's one idea that's on the table right now.
Okay, I don't see any hands up right now. If anybody else has ideas, questions, things they want to talk about, go ahead and use that hand raise thing. I'll wait here for just, Bex says your hand raise feature is not functioning. Go right ahead, Bex, please.
Thank you very much. I'm an organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We're really concerned about a project that's blatantly aimed at displacing homeless people, and we believe that's not in the best interest of our community. In a news article recently, the Chamber of Commerce is really clear about targeting the homeless with the building of the stadium downtown. And this is really it's a gentrification project. Housing is going to become more expensive and less accessible for existing and future residents. And making the workers pay for this gentrification project of their own neighborhood is really absurd. The money should be used to house people, actually improve housing here, raise minimum wage, and make public transportation functional. I think if United wants to build a stadium, it shouldn't be done with the tax dollars of New Mexicans, and especially not working with these financial gangsters, the Chamber of Commerce, who are so excited to displace homeless people rather than house them. I really don't think this can be classified as a community project if there's no guarantee that the residents who currently live in Morelos and the downtown area can continue to afford housing. So what can New Mexico United do to demand guaranteed rent control for residents? This isn't just about small businesses. People and families' well-being are at stake, and there's a lot more people downtown than small businesses. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot, Bex. Really appreciate everything you said and respect what you said. And one, I think I'd like to learn a little bit more about, displacing homeless people. That's an area I could learn more about. And the more I can learn about it, the more we can make sure we're not, displacing people. We're trying to have a positive impact. And while that's an easy thing to say, I'm definitely committed to learning more about it and the more I can understand it, then maybe I can really answer your question and be a voice for that, because I don't think we want to displace people. And, we have spoken with some of the shelters and organizations that work with the homeless in that area, to see how we can help them. And I think going into your second point around gentrification and rent control and all that, the best idea I've heard around that is talking to the community about a community benefits agreement or program that addresses that, and to the best it can. And so I like to the extent that we have a voice in that, and we will, and we'll participate in that as well. I think that's where we're going to start, but we have to go a lot deeper on the conversations. And I really hope that, the idea that this, facility happens doesn't mean that some of the other things you mentioned don't happen, because those other things need to happen too. We need money to fund those projects. And, I believe that in the past, the city has funded some of those projects, and they should in the future as well. But I don't think that we can only fund one thing. I think we have to figure out how to spread it around and take care of our issues at the same time, giving ourselves things that we can build around that. And that's how I feel about this stadium. So happy to talk to you about it more, and really mostly just learn more from you about it. And hopefully we can at least, maybe not get it exactly where you want to be, but maybe we can, chip away at that. So thank you.
And anybody else who wanted to speak? I didn't see any raised hands, but I know Bex's hand raise feature wasn't working. Maybe someone else's wasn't either. Anybody else who wanted to put a question, a comment, anything they wanted to say? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time, for hanging out with us today. Appreciate everybody giving us their time and giving us their thoughts. And I think we've learned a lot, and we're going to continue to do so. As I mentioned before, this is just the first one of these. Would love to see, if those of you have their cameras on, by a raise of hands, how comfortable, if you would be comfortable doing these in person, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. We would just kind of love to get a conversation on that. Okay, looks like about half of the people with their cameras on. Oh, okay, cool. A couple more people with their hands raised. So let's go ahead and go with Keith Dallas. Go right ahead, Keith.
I just kind of wanted to snowball off of what some others have said in terms of prioritizing this. I know it's not a priority for a lot of people due to the fact that crime is so rampant in the city, homelessness as well. There is just so many other things that should be considered publicly. Maybe the talk of a homeless shelter should be talked about with public discussion. I get that the stadium will be used to bring the community together, but until crime and other issues are under control, that doesn't really matter too much. If people don't feel safe going out in their community, let alone, leaving their vehicle parked in an area that's unsafe and where even, property crime is rampant. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Totally understand that, your priority list, and, you've got some solid priorities, and I see that. I think that, I think ultimately, everyone has their list, and I think really what's being proposed is just that we bring it to voters and let people decide. And if enough people don't see it as a priority, then it won't pass. And if enough people do, then I guess then it does pass, and then we move on to deeper discussions on where. So, I think that's just the process that we have, and I think it's a good process. So, I think those are some of the things that are going to get talked about a lot over the next few months, and then then it will go to a vote, and we'll see where things end up. So thank you for your comments. I think
we have one more there. We have let's see, Matthew Salcido. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hi. So obviously the big election for the stadium is going to be the bond issue. I was just wondering who you've been working with the city mostly to get this organized and try to get this concluded. Is it the mayor's office? Is it the council? Is it some department? And then if there is a change in administration, how could that possibly derail this, even if the bond issue is approved by the voters? Has any of that been anticipated or communicated with other candidates or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of this piece, we generally communicate with the city and some city councilors, mostly to understand, the issues around it and what some of the different possibilities are. And you're right, officials can change. Not every city councilor is running for re-election. Mayors may get, mayor may be revoted in, maybe not. That's up for the people to decide. And so, this bond issue essentially, states that the city will bond against, for the stadium. And then if we had a new mayor, for example, we would work with that mayor to work through the project. And they may have him or her may have a different vision of what that project should be than the current mayor. That's just a bridge that we have to cross. And that's something that's always out there. But if that's where we are, then that's how we'll approach it. I don't think it changes our point of view on what we believe are some priorities around making sure it works in the community and other things. But we'll have to just cross that bridge if we get there.
All right. Thank you all for taking the time again. Really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us here. Again, we're going to be doing lots of these, and appreciate everybody, again, the respectful conversation and questions and all that. We've taken a lot from here. But, I put my email there in the chat. If you guys have additional questions, if there's things that I can be helpful with, please feel free to reach out to me in that way. But thank you all for taking the time, and I think we'll call it a night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
The recording has stopped.